Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about over-engineering. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Frederick, how can a software engineer avoid over-engineering a project? Well, I would say that the best way to avoid over-engineering is to ask the fundamental question: how do I make this thing the simplest and smoothest thing that I can make it? And try to balance that with, are there any risks that can be measured in bugs or poor performance or output or something like that by not doing the simplest thing, if that makes sense. Let me explain that a little bit. So I usually tell the software developers that I work with, when we talk about like technical strategies and so forth, that it's always easier to add code or add features than it is to remove or change something that is already there. And when you sort of understand the cost of change or removing dependencies and so forth, you start to understand that the ideal situation for you is always to be in a state where you can take the next step into what you need now without having to undo anything. In other words, you want to create a continuous state where the next step is the cheapest possible thing that you can possibly make, if that makes sense. Because if you over-engineer, which is usually the case, then you increase the cost of taking and going in a new direction or trying something out or doing something that is needed right here and now. And so by having this idea that you don't really know what's coming next, it forces you to think about, okay, what is it that I truly need right here, right now to solve my problem without or rather with the minimum amount of effort and impact on future development, if that makes sense. Because the issue with over-engineering is that you can almost always check yourself when you are trying to think about the future too much. In other words, not what you need right now or what's going to be a good and stable solution for the moment, but you start getting into hypothetical scenarios that are going to come down the line. This is when you're in the danger zone of over-engineering something. So what you want is, as I said, to try to make that this is very difficult, guys. It is so difficult. Creative people are, this is the thing. It's sort of like, if creativity is a fire, it's sort of like saying that you can't let it burn as bright and as strong as you could let it burn, because if you do, you're going to burn everything down, right? It's sort of like saying that you want to control this almost raw force, which is creativity. And trust me when I say this, the balancing act of this is it's an ongoing struggle for every single person that is creative. You think about all the artists around the world who feel limited or restricted by everything from their clients to their governments to whatever. It's the same thing for us software developers. You want to create these amazing solutions because you have this creative fire, right? But and how do you then tell yourself when you're in that zone where you really have this great idea that no, actually I need to temper myself a little bit here. So let's pull it down to a more sane level and build something that is less inspiring to me but more stable for the company and the future, if that makes sense. This is very difficult. It's difficult for every person, regardless of what they are doing. It is the mark of maturity and rationality and wisdom, if I would like to go as far as to say that it's basically wisdom. Because you know that if you just indulge your emotions too much, you're more likely to make a mistake. So my tip to you, which is the thing that it's just something that I do, or I try to think that way, is to, instead of try to be excited about creating the perfect solution. So in other words, instead of being excited about flexing your engineering muscles and trying to use the most advanced tools to create highly sophisticated solutions to a problem, try to get excited about really nailing it, like really nailing the perfect creme de la creme solution for the problem that you have. Not too much, not too little. Is sort of, I make the analogy to a toaster. If somebody wants you to make a toaster, well, from an engineer's perspective, that might not be the most challenging task in the world. Maybe you wanted to have a problem that was in the quantum physics realm or something like that. But the toaster is the thing that the client wants, or the customer, or the scope of the problem, right? So instead of now being sort of frustrated with that the challenge of this is not high enough in terms of complexity, try to really get excited about building the gold standard of toasters, if that makes sense, within, you know, what the scope is. And that has always helped me to really try to think in that manner. As I said, instead of trying to create the most sophisticated solution, I try to figure out what is the perfect, most simple solution that everybody's going to love working with if I do this thing here, and simplify it. Because the elegance in a problem is to take something that is very bothersome or complex and making it simple enough that you can sort of, I mean, that's what I argue at the very least. That's the true challenge in engineering, to take a very complicated and bothersome problem and simplifying it to the point where it's no longer a problem. That is the task at hand. And you do that, as I said, by trying to figure out how can I do the least amount necessary here. So it's like it's almost like creating the perfect car or the perfect power grid or something like that. You don't want to use too much electricity or emissions or whatever. You want to get the most amount that is exactly the right amount that is necessary to do the job, no more, no less. It's a perfect sweet spot of complexity for you as a software developer. Does this thing fill all the criteria I have right now without me skimming so much that it's actually damaging, you know, as I said, my ability to make future decisions on top of it? That's the difference between hacking something, in my opinion, hacking something together and creating a perfect solution. Because if you start hacking things together and you don't write tests or things like that, you don't really treat the code well, then you have technically done the minimum thing that you need, but you've also damaged your future of making that next decision the cheapest thing possible. Because, as I said, you're actually accumulating problems, and the idea is not to have a deficit, if that makes sense. The idea is to hit the mark every single time, just on the mark, and that is, as I said, it's the biggest, I would say, problem for creative people there is when it comes to shipping anything. Like, when is enough? When is enough? If you never because art, like anything that is creative, it could in theory continue forever. But you have to make a cut-off point somewhere. So what I want you to take away from this is that the way that I suggest that you try to avoid over-engineering is to always ask the question, how much do I have to do in order for this thing to fill all the criteria that I need without doing more than is necessary and without skimming on the quality of the current solution? As I said, try to get excited about creating the perfect solution for the moment. So with my toaster analogy, instead of dreaming of building more advanced things, because that's not what you're doing right now, maybe you can find another project in the future where you do those more advanced things. Try to think about the thing that you're making now. Maybe it's a toaster, maybe it's something else. Make that the best toaster that has ever been created. Create that thing and get really happy about making an amazing toaster or box, or like something simple. The thing you're actually making, make that thing really, really well, so that when that's shipped, everybody loves this thing. And then the next time you're going to ship something, you start with the cheapest, like you have no legacy, you have no nothing. You can just start and make the next thing and do the same thing. Make each step as valuable as you can possibly make towards those end goals that you might have, or your company has, or your client has. Have a great day.